Just going to wait a couple more minutes.
Okay, you're live.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. This is the Public Health Subcommittee for the Cannabis Advisory Commission for Nevada. And we're just waiting for one more commissioner. Oh, speak of the devil. So I think we're about ready to get going then. Commissioner Chu, are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Turn my video on. Yep.
All right, there we go. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Pearson. I am the chair of this subcommittee, and I see we have all of our committee members here. So Commissioners Chu, Nelson, Dupree, and Hayes. And so before we get going, I just want to orient everyone to what we're going to be doing today. So the purpose of today's meeting is to review our final set of public health related recommendations concerning the cannabis consumption lounges that the state of Nevada is standing up. So I'm going to present these recommendations at the next full Cannabis Advisory Board, or excuse me, Cannabis Advisory Commission. We don't really need to formally approve these recommendations, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take votes on each section just so I can kind of take the temperature of the committee, and we're going to discuss them also, and I'm going to summarize those discussions for the overall Cannabis Advisory Commission to identify, here's an area where we all really agreed strongly. Here's an area where perhaps we agreed in principle, but not the details. Here's an area where there was disagreement. So again, we don't really need to have 100% agreement on everything, though I think we are pretty close to that for a lot of stuff, right? It's more, we're gathering information and I'm going to summarize it for the Cannabis Advisory Commission. When I present to the CAC, then at that point, there will be more discussion. And then as a group, the Cannabis Advisory Commission will decide what they want to put forward to the Cannabis Control Board. Some confusing names that are very similar, so excuse me for stumbling over some of them. And then the CCB will decide what they want to do with these recommendations. So all of that is to say that, there will be opportunity for public comment today, but then there will also be opportunity for public comment at each one of these steps in the future. So, certainly this is likely to be the last public health subcommittee meeting that we're going to have for a while. I expect that we'll probably reconvene maybe in early winter to start talking about some of the stuff that we brought up during our first meeting as things that we wanted to revisit. But remember, we were tasked with focusing on regulations for the consumption lounges because that's the first thing that's on the CCB's to-do list, and they need to get that going sooner rather than later. So all of that said, then I want to open it up for public comment, the next thing on our agenda. So if you are on Zoom, you can indicate to me that you would like to make public comment by raising your hand on Zoom, which if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little icon that says raise hand. So you can raise your hand there. And if you're on the phone, I believe you indicate that you want to make public comment by pushing *9. I believe that's right, *9. Is there any public comment before we get going? I see Katrie Saunders would like to make public comment. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Katrie Saunders. I'm a longtime patient advocate and activist in the state of Nevada. I got set up by the DEA under Operation Chronic Problem after I helped over 800 patients get legal in the state of Nevada's program. I've also helped grand open the Source Dispensary, the dispensary in Nevada. I've worked at Silver Sage Wellness and Glossy Edibles. For the past 2.5 years, I've been speaking out in regards to social justice and how I am not able to participate in the industry due to my cannabis felony from helping patients in the state of Nevada. I was over at the social equity meeting yesterday discussing real social justice issues and how if you guys are really wanting to fix the problem and address the non-Black ownership in Las Vegas in regards to dispensaries and cultivations and ancillary businesses, not just consumption lounges. Those most adversely affected by the war on drugs deserve ownership, not limited to just consumption lounges or the things that you guys think that we should have. All business avenues should be opened up and not have high regulatory fees on us entering into the market. Moving forward, I would like to see more accountability in addressing this subject so that people can begin to heal and repair some of the damage that has been sustained at a local and at a federal level. I spoke to Tick Sager-Bloom in regards to having a special session to address some of the issues that I'm dealing with, as well as others. They might not have the platform or the voice to speak out in regards to these matters. So thank you for letting me speak today. If I could be of any assistance, I can leave my email in the chat, and I'd like to help moving forward to change the narrative on ownership in Nevada. Thank you for your time. I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? I see Joelle Dodson. Go ahead.
This is Joelle Dodson for the record. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Subcommittee on Public Health. The Washoe County Health District is recommending that the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board be responsible for the food safety regulations and inspections on all of Nevada's cannabis consumption lounges. This will ensure consistent regulations and enforcement across the state. The Health District's Environmental Health Division is responsible for ensuring compliance with local, state, and federal laws and regulating food, waste, water, vector, and other areas of public health in Washoe County. There are approximately 4,000 permitted retail food establishments in Washoe County that range from full-service restaurants, food trucks, school kitchens, grocery stores, and food manufacturing establishments. In addition, over 900 temporary food permits for special events are issued in an average year. Each facility is inspected a minimum of one time annually. Staff are registered environmental health specialists with the state of Nevada and receive ongoing training in addition to the minimum requirements to maintain their REHS. At this time, THC, CBD, and other cannabis byproducts are not FDA-approved food additives, and the health district's regulations governing food establishments prohibit such products to be used in any food product throughout the county. While updating the health district's regulations is possible, it will require workshops for public feedback, adoption by the Washoe County District Board of Health, and finally, adoption by the Nevada State Board of Health. In Nevada, each jurisdiction adopts their own food regulations, and there's no guarantee that all jurisdictions will be able to adopt the same regulations covering THC, CBD, and other cannabis byproducts. There are unique challenges to inspecting food preparation and dosage of THC, CBD, and other cannabis byproducts as various factors. For example, cooking temperature or fat content of a food product can result in increased or decreased levels of absorption rates in the body. These types of variables will require a significant amount of training and expertise to implement that the health district is not currently prepared nor equipped to engage in. The level of expertise and training required to provide effective and efficient food safety inspections deserves a dedicated statewide team of experts. Washoe County Health District values the work this committee has engaged in to evaluate all aspects of public health and safety. Thank you in advance for your consideration of having the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board be responsible for food safety regulations and inspections of all Nevada's cannabis consumption lounges. Thank you.
You. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to make public comment? You can go ahead and raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can press *9. I don't see anybody on Zoom. I believe, Amber, do you see anyone on the phone?
I see no other public comment.
Okay. All right, well then we're going to move on to the next section of the agenda. Of course, we will have another section of public comments. So if you do have more to say, we welcome it then. So we have a pretty long meeting scheduled, 3 hours. I am hoping that we won't need all 3 hours though. I think we can do it in less. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reverse the order of what we did during our last meeting when we first talked about our recommendations from our science sections. So we're going to go over the inspection recommendations with Commissioner Hayes and then move on to the occupational health and training recommendations with Commissioner DePreet, and then ready to consume with Commissioner Chu, the health notices and disclosures with Commissioner Nelson, and then I'll finish up with the air quality regulations. What I think I'd like to do, if possible, is for us to go over our regulations, our recommendations for each one of our sections again, and then open it up for discussion. And then if anyone wants to make any specific comments or suggestions on any of the specific recommendations in that section, we can go to that. Once we've gone through that process, we can take a step back again and ask ourselves, are we willing to kind of take the temperature of the commission by voting on the entire section, or do we want to break it down by recommendation if maybe there's, strong support for a few recommendations, but like different levels of support for others. And so I imagine each one of these discussions will take roughly 20 to 30 minutes. So perhaps if you could keep your overview of your recommendations to about 10 minutes, that would be great. So with that said, Commissioner Hayes, are you ready to take us through your inspection recommendations?
My video is not working today. I keep freezing myself, so
Okay.
that's why it's off. Just kept watching myself be frozen. So I first want to clarify the fact that recommendations for inspections should not be put in regulation. So this is something that would go as an aside, a policy, a guidance document, recommendations on, what we train on. There are some outstanding questions that we still do not have the answers for, whether or not county level health departments and jurisdictions would be doing their own inspections. This would be done in like a team-like effort. So no recommendations that, we have would go into an actual recommendation, into an actual regulation.
Yeah, I think at this point, what we're doing is we're kind of, think of it as in an ideal situation, what do we think as experts in this area or as the right way to do things? And fortunately, the CCB, the folks who are going to get into the weeds at the CCB can figure out the details, but we can make kind of top level, principles, recommendations. and explain why we're making these recommendations, recognizing that it might not be practical, there might need to be other things that are going to happen, but we don't need to worry about that at this point.
The people that do these inspections should be, trained REHSs with more than 3 to 5 years experience.
Mhm.
I do not see an individual who's just coming on board with a health authority to have the kind of inspection experience that would be required to do one of these inspections. They're very technical. They may have a lot of specialized equipment. And so those are the kinds of things I worry about. So you would have to be a full REHS, not an REHST, what we call a trainee level. So no
What does REHS stand for?
Registered Environmental Health Specialist.
Okay, thanks.
And then there's an REHST. So for the first 3 years, essentially, they're in training mode. This may limit our pool of inspectors.
Mhm.
And that may be an issue. But being a full REHS with the trainings behind you, so 10 inspections in a CCB facility, restaurant type of facility, much like what we do for manufactured now, you have to have 10 inspections with a lead so that you understand what you are looking at: food safety, employee health, cross-contamination issues, refrigeration issues. And now we're going to add an extra layer of complexity with testing and record keeping and those kinds of things. So 10 inspections with that lead, recorded, and manufactured food training. So, not less than FD 190, which is the manufactured, training classes offered by the FDA. So that we have some, basis and background for, going in there. So those are my recommendations to keep them in a nutshell.
Great. Commissioner Chu, do you have any additional?
Yeah, just a little clarification. When you say testing, are you talking about testing and record keeping? Are you talking about testing of the product in the cannabis industry, or are you? I'm sorry,
So
yes.
There are going to be records on how much THC is in each product, right?
Yes.
So they would have to learn to look at a lab inspection report,
Okay.
ensure that it was in the correct parameters. So I'm just saying, looking at records, not like doing testing, but looking at the records and making sure they're complete.
Okay. But if this is done combined with an inspector from CCB who is used to looking at those records, would that alleviate the training question for the health inspector?
We can certainly separate, especially if we go in as a team. I don't think that's been established yet. So if you had one inspector going in, like we normally do now, one inspector going in, they would have to have that full set of experiences, food establishments, the record keeping, everything. If you had a team, a pair, an environmental health specialist for food and a CCB inspector go in, you could certainly separate those requirements if it was a team, but none of that has been sorted yet.
Well, we could recommend that. So we could, if we think, Commissioner Hayes, if you think that's the best way to do it, we could recommend that there's a CCB and a REH.
Yes.
Inspector who gives about what
So,
about that?
yeah, I think that's the best way to go. They can feed off of each other's expertise. But again, that decision hasn't been made. And of course, if I don't have the staff. If a county chooses to bow out of this, I do not have the staff to supplement CCB's inspection staff.
And Commissioner Dupree, did you have something you wanted to share? You're on.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that also, I don't know that it's a given that health inspectors will be inspecting the lounges, right? Yes, there's going to be a food component, but we could also recommend, I mean, in my recommendations, I've actually added one that we didn't talk about last time about maybe postponing the full service food of TCS, the more dangerous foods, for a few years, let everybody get their feet wet on the snacky sort of stuff that doesn't require refrigeration, that doesn't have cook steps sort of things. And that would give CCB time to train up their existing staff who do their inspections for, the edibles and that sort of thing, train them up on the food side of things, and then CCB could handle all of this. So kind of maybe it's hard to vote before seeing all of the recommendations, but in the event that it's just CCB who's been trained up to handle the full inspection, maybe our recommendation is more of, make sure the staff who are doing the inspection, regardless of location, maybe have the REHS training and, are fully trained to handle all aspects of it. So however we want to word that. But if our concern is that it's tricky, it's intricate, there's a lot of things to address, which we know there will be from multiple different sides, maybe our recommendation is just a broader, make sure the staff are fully capable and trained. And then depending on which jurisdiction becomes responsible for it, then we could be more clear on what that looks like. But if our concern is they're prepared and capable, I think we can make that recommendation without knowing which jurisdiction will be handling it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So I am hearing that regardless of who is responsible, we want to recommend that the people doing the inspections have, that they are registered environmental health specialists.
Yes.
And that they also have FD 190
Yes.
certifications, and that they also have familiarity with
So we call them OJEs, on the job experience.
Right, okay.
So 10 OJEs before you're turned loose without your trainer on an inspection.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is just good old-fashioned inspecting.
Okay, so we want it for trainees. We want them to have, is the 10 kind of apprentice inspections? Is that standard?
Yes, for us it is. It depends on where you are. I don't know how Southern Nevada does it, but when we go through retail inspections, as a beginning inspector, you do 75 inspections with a trainer. So you're watching a trainer for 25, you were leading for 25, and then another 25, we hang back and don't say anything. I think 10 is what we use for manufactured food. And I think 10 is a nice round number for that. But under the tutelage of a trainer familiar with these food facilities and the complexity, and document 10 inspections with that trainer before being allowed to roam around on their own. And that is standard for the state health department.
Okay.
It would be curious to know what Lauren and SNHD do as their standard training.
So we have roughly 6 months on the job training. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. It's been a minute since I've been in training. But we do a similar style where the trainees observe first, then they lead, and then there's still kind of under the umbrella of our training officers as they do them on their own, and then come back and review their paperwork and discuss what they saw before they're signed off. So yeah, I mean, just this job in general is such a unique position that it has to be on the job training for a lot of it. And then I think if we want to vote on this recommendation, it would be helpful to share a little more details on what an REHS is and what FD 190 is. Would that be? Yeah.
Okay, so an REHS is under 625A. It is a Nevada state law. People who come into these positions as health inspectors within the first 30 days have to sign up with the REHS board. So we have our own board, and the board accept your application. You have to turn in the application in 30 days. Then you have 3 years of on-the-job training, depending on what it is you do. An REHS covers 18 topics: food, solid waste, air components, pathogens, anything that you can think of that goes into an environmental health specialist position. So for 3 years, they, study under this, and then they go and take an exam. And it's a nationwide exam under the National Environmental Health Association, who provides that exam. And within 3 years, you become a nationally recognized registered environmental health specialist. For the first 3 years, you are an REHST, which is the trainee. And so you have covered a lot of topics and been tested on it. And, at that point, you are a, stand on your own inspector. Although I will agree that most of this is always a team effort.
So when you are a registered environmental health specialist, what is it that you are certified to inspect?
Everything that's been assigned to you. It covers 18 topics, but depending on your health department, you have certain programs, and then you get training in those programs. So between the REHS and the training you receive in your program. So if you work in the food program, you're going to get, 75 inspections or 6 months training. If you work in an air quality program, you may get, some amount of inspections and, 6 months of training. But all of that is documented throughout the process so that we know that you have training in those topics. So here, I can see it being food, lab results, air quality. And we would make sure that they had training in all 3 of those sections.
Right. Okay. So, and then what's the content of the FD 190 certification?
FD 190 is manufactured food because of the intricacies of the equipment that would be used in order to prepare some of these products. FD 190 is a nationwide training program provided by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I can provide funding for all people who want to go and take that training. So we have been funneling money to the local health authorities for a while now to get this training. So it is everything manufactured. So ROP packaging, what kind of packages, lidding, canning, those kinds of things. It is a general overview of high-level food.
So is that an inspection that would happen at the level of the manufacturer or the level of the server? So for example, if there's like a venue that's serving chips, would an FD 190 certification to inspect that venue where it's serving the chips? Is that necessary, or is it more go to the,
So that
make-
training would be for the manufacturer of the product. So I'm going to make a chip and put it in a package.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made a chip and put it in a package. That would be that training.
Okay.
Nothing more than this, 10 inspections in the food. I don't think FD 190 is just for, I'm going to hand you a package of chips.
Right. Okay. If that's the case, then I don't think that's necessary for the people inspecting the cannabis consumption lounges, because they're not going to be manufacturing prepared food there. They will be, bringing it into it'll be manufactured someplace else.
Well, I understand that this will, today we may start out with packaged foods,
Yeah.
prepared somewhere else, but this is going to grow, I think, fairly quickly.
Oh yeah.
People will want to do other things right away.
Commissioner Chu.
Sorry. Yes, I was going to make that same point, that we have both the prepackaged and the ready to consume, which would be prepared on site. So
The ready to consume would be prepared and consumed on site.
right. And so I think that might fall under
Okay.
what Teresa was talking about, in that it's not you're not just opening up a prepackaged item, you're
Right.
actually doing some food handling at that point.
Right. Okay.
I mean, if we could make this all about prepackaged, ready-to-eat foods, forever, I mean, that's one thing. And you could certainly go to a much lower degree of training, but I just don't think we're going to stay there.
Right. So let me summarize what I'm hearing so far as 2 recommendations that would come out of this section. The first recommendation is that whomever is doing these inspections, they need a REHS certification and an FD 190 certification. And they also need familiarity with the cannabis product testing process and reports.
Yes.
And then the second recommendation would be that ideally we would fulfill this first recommendation by there being teams of REHS and CCB inspectors. Now, where those people come from exactly, TBD. But we do think that teams would be the best way to achieve the level of expertise we are recommending in recommendation 1.
I do.
Cool. Is there anything else that you would like to add to these 2 recommendations that I just summarized?
No.
Anybody else? Okay. So I think we might be at the point now where we could vote to see if we are supportive of these as a group. I propose that we vote on them together. Is there anyone that wants to split them out? Okay. So I think if you could just, Commissioner Dupree, do you have?
Sorry, I would prefer to split them out.
Oh, okay. You would prefer, okay. So let's do for recommendation 1. Why don't you, commissioners, just raise your hand if you are supportive of making this recommendation to the Cannabis Advisory Commission in general.
Wait, which recommendation? I'm
Recommendation
confused.
1, I will read it again.
Thank you, sorry.
Inspectors should have the registered environmental health specialist and the FD 190 certification, and also familiarity with cannabis product testing reports.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
This is Ashish from the AG's office. If I may just make one recommendation, I would advise that we ask one of the members to put forward a motion to approve
Okay.
the recommendation, and then it be seconded, and then we take a vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Formal Robert's rules. Here we go.
All right, so I can do that part since this is my section. I make a motion to approve the processes for training and inspection.
For recommendation 1.
For recommendation 1.
Very good. Do I have a second?
I second it. This is Ben Chu for the record.
Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone to lower their hands. And if you are in favor, could you raise your hand on Zoom, please? Okay, I see everyone has their hands raised. Okay, great, thank you.
So now we're moving on to 2.
Moving on to 2, let me just summarize what 2 is again.
Okay.
So recommendation 2 is, since it's not 100% clear who is ultimately responsible for these inspections, what we recommend is that there be teams of people that have both backgrounds from CCB inspectors, as well as registered environmental health specialists with these FD 190 certifications, so that they can provide the degree of expertise needed that we're recommending in recommendation 1. Do I have a?
All right. This is Teresa Hayes. I make a motion to approve the second portion of section 2
recommendation
and
two?
training and inspections.
Very good. Do I have a second?
This has been Chu. I second.
Thank you. Everyone raise their hands if they are in favor of putting forward recommendation 2 to the Cannabis Advisory Commission. Okay. I see everyone but Commissioner Dupree. Commissioner Dupree, do you want to just tell us what your thinking is there?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if we're already requiring the people doing the inspections to have all of the training that we just agreed on, and Commissioner Hayes said that she doesn't have the staff to send out there, and I know Washoe said that they don't want to be handling it. I'm not sure that I want to recommend having health department staff on these inspections if we don't have the capacity for it, and if we're already going to recommend that the existing CCB staff get the training. That's
Got it.
all. I don't
Right.
think it's bad. I just think that we're going to kind of work around it a little bit.
Okay. So when I am summarizing our discussion here, I can, when I'm summarizing, I can mention this concern. I think that's very reasonable. Also considering the public comment we received. So the concern is that there's not enough capacity from the local health departments to make this happen.
Right.
So that is something we need to keep in mind.
And also that recommendation may grow if you start out with packaged foods. That wouldn't be necessary at the beginning, but only after you've moved to foods prepared on site.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, so with that, then if we're talking about 3 years as a trainer, then are we talking a 3-year delay and to get the certification for people? And I guess I'm just throwing this out there, that what is the program that you would put CCB inspectors under to get this, to do their trainer thing along with somebody else?
Right.
It turns into a full-time job doing 75 inspections for a different department. Just something to think about.
Yeah. So the flip side of that is perhaps CCB does not have inspectors that have this certification already. And if it's a 3-year process to go from a trainee to a fully certified inspector, then, are CCB in a situation where they can't really provide the level of expertise that they need to. So this is like a continuous issue, right? Is resources.
Yes.
Commissioner Dupree.
And just as a note, I'm not sure I 100% agree that the inspectors would have to have been through their 3 years and moved on from trainee to REHS, just because I know a lot of very capable staff who are 2 years in and who are doing tricky things. And so if that alleviates things, as long as there's, I don't know that we have to detail the exact training underneath it, but as long as they're en route to become REHS, and that, internally CCB has a training program that includes observation, conducting under supervision, and being approved and released to conduct on their own, then that might alleviate some things.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. I'm just making some notes.
And I didn't see a chat box today, but I was going to send a link for REHS information just so you guys have a little bit more context. But
Yeah, I think this type of interface is a little different. Commissioner Nelson.
I just wanted to comment kind of to what Commissioner Dupree was saying with requiring all of the inspectors to have REHS certifications. So in my experience, we have been audited and inspected by many CCB agents over the years, and not all of them have REHS certification. There are a few people at the CCB that currently have this, and they oversee a lot of the inspections, but at the ground level, the people that have actually came through and done our inspections, several of them haven't had this certification. And I mean, I may be a little biased in saying this, but I thought that they've done a very good job, and they were, you know, very knowledgeable on what they needed to look at and what they needed to inspect. But I just guess I wanted to put that out there because the existing practice has not necessarily required this for all inspectors, but they do have some people available with that certification for reference purposes and for training purposes.
Okay.
Hi, this is Teresa. I will update that. You know, the REHS board last year passed a requirement for all CCB staff to become REHSs.
Okay, all right.
So I will summarize when I put this forward to the CAC that the discussion was perhaps that, you know, that there are skilled people who are not completely finished with their training. So just that recommendation there, you know, I think there's a balance between emphasizing the need for people who are specialists with experience, with also the reality that there are people on the pathway to having that full certification who are skilled already and probably adequately skilled.
And they might feel that they need to make a recommendation as far as like a grace period, right? To get on board with REHS and to get through all that training. So whether it's a grace period for the first 3 years, then after that, everybody has to be full REHS or something like that, that would make sense.
Right, okay. All right. Okay, I think we're going to move on from inspection recommendations then, unless there's anything else that we want to discuss in this section. Okay, seeing nothing. Thank you, Commissioner Hayes. That was wonderful. Let's move on to the occupational health and training recommendations. So that's Commissioner DePleat.
Okay, let me pull up a PowerPoint so we can go through them one by one.
So as she's doing that, just to remind everyone, let's let her go through it all. And then if you have things that you want to bring up, just make a note of it and then we can go back.
Okay, let me scoot this up. Any problems seeing the PowerPoint? Okay. So the first recommendation I'm putting forward is to log customer illness. So to require consumption lounges to log and report any illness observed on site or reported to the lounge afterward to the regulatory authority responsible for investigating outbreaks. So whether that will be CCB, I don't know if CCB wants to be the ones to respond to cases of illness at a lounge or if they want it to be the local or state health authority, but whoever makes that decision, once in action, I think consumption lounges should have to log all of the illness and report it. And those reports should include the symptoms of the foodborne any symptoms of foodborne illness, symptoms of overconsumption or otherwise, anything kind of weird going on, to include the date and time of consumption, type of consumption, date and time of illness onset, a description of the illness, what symptoms they're experiencing, and contact information. As much of that is known from the report. And to make this log of illness available for review during inspections and as requested by the regulatory authority. I think this is important to assist in illness surveillance and investigations because, of course, the faster we can identify the illness, the faster it can be addressed and we can prevent further illness. So if there's ongoing transmission at a facility, we want to know it as soon as possible so that we could put in corrective actions to stop the spread. Next recommendation is to post an employee health policy. So require that this employee health policy be visible to all employees, that it includes symptoms of foodborne illness and diagnosed illnesses that employees would be excluded from work if they were experiencing. CDC reports that half of restaurant outbreaks are due to ill employees. I think there's a lot of overlap between a restaurant and a lounge, whether they're serving food or serving pre-rolls, things that are going to be going into their mouths. And employees need to know when they need to call out of work. So I've included just the same handout. It could be as simple as this or something with the same information, just posted somewhere so that the employees can see it, so that we're thinking about these foodborne illness symptoms. This is supposed to be 3. I'm not good at counting. So I'll update that. Log employee illness as well. So first I recommended logging customer illness. Now I'm recommending logging employee illness. Similar requirements. And again, the reason for that is managers need to know who should and shouldn't be handling items that can transmit illness. Also, a lot of restaurant outbreaks, like I said, are due to ill employees. And this requirement is encouraged by the FDA and CDC, does not violate HIPAA or the ADA. So this link that I have here, I've actually copied just right here. So this is a handout that we use quite a bit during outbreaks. A lot of times managers are hesitant to ask their employees about illness symptoms. And this is just reinforcing the idea that it is encouraged by the FDA food code. It does not violate HIPAA or the ADA. So this is something that answers a lot of questions in case anybody is hesitant about that. If we're working on public health, we're looking on outbreak, detection and response. It's important to know who is sick with what. The next recommendation is for cannabis training. We talked about this, to require staff to obtain a cannabis safety related training and certification. We would want this training to include the clinical effects of cannabis on the human body, methods of identifying overconsumption, methods of preventing sexual assault and disturbances of the peace, and all applicable state and local laws. And then, leaving it up to the CCB to decide whether they want to meet this recommendation by developing a Nevada-specific training or utilize the various existing trainings that Commissioner Hayes discussed at our last meeting. I think this is important to ensure safe and lawful consumption and to protect the users. Next recommendation is for a food handler card. So if the consumption lounge serves food, to require that staff obtain a food handler card or equivalent. So either a food handler card from a local health department, but of course not all health departments offer this in the state. So to also could meet this requirement by using a food handler training from ServSafe or other ANSI equivalent organizations. These already exist. Again, I think it's important because foodborne illness sickens a lot of people and we need staff to know how to prevent it. Next recommendation is for a certified food protection manager. This is already a requirement in the dispensaries, I believe. So if the lounge serves food, to require that they have a certified food protection manager on site at all hours of operation. Same reasoning here. Foodborne illness gets people sick and we can prevent it through proper training and procedures. Next up, to require written plans. So all consumption lounges must have a written plan with instructions for how to address the following potentially dangerous scenarios: overconsumption, sexual assaults, or attempts to drive while intoxicated. And this is to keep cannabis consumption safe for all participants and the community around. Next is to adopt appropriate food regulations. So I'm recommending here to either adopt the food regulations of the local or state health authority or to adopt equivalent regulations modeled after the FDA food code that adequately addresses all aspects of food safety. I think you've noticed from Commissioner Hayes and myself that there's a lot of hesitation about allowing full service food in these lounges. There's a lot of risk associated with that. And we have a very extensive food regulations here in Southern Nevada. I'm sure elsewhere in the state does as well. We're all modeled after the FDA food code, even if there's slight differences between the different authorities. The reason why they're so extensive is because they're addressing all the different ways food can be prepared and all the different ways food can become a risk to the person eating it, and how to reduce that risk and how to handle it safely. So especially as we open up the possibility of serving what we call TCS foods, which are time and temperature controlled for safety foods. So those are your dairy items, your meat, your cooked vegetables, that sort of thing. As we handle those, we're increasing the risk. So we want to make sure that there are regulations in place to control that. Next recommendation is to postpone using TCS foods. So I would recommend to temporarily restrict the use of these TCS foods. And that will allow consumption lounges to open with the simpler, safer foods first for the ones who do want to offer food. It will allow the regulatory agency time to develop or adopt appropriate regulations and train the staff and industry on appropriate food safety. And then the board can allow TCS foods at a later time. So I don't know if they would want to say, today it's not allowed, but in 5 years it will be, or today it's not allowed, but we'll revisit next year or something like that. But I think in order to get the lounges moving quicker, it makes sense to me to allow the lounges to open, but with this temporary restriction until we can get everything necessary in place to keep it safe. And then we talked about devices. So this is just summarizing our discussion last time. Required devices to either be brought in by the customer, verified by staff that it's empty upon arrival. And then if we decide that customers can't carry anything out, then it would need to be verified on departure that it's empty, or go to a single-use model to provide an on-site device to be used on-site and then either carried out or discarded. And that's because there's no clear guidance on proper cleaning and sanitization of devices from our federal agencies, and it reduces liability for the lounges, right? That's going to be a really important step, the cleaning and sanitizing between uses. And if we don't have clear federal guidance and the lounges are taking it upon themselves, they're really opening themselves up to liability. So I think, yes, those are all of my recommendations. So with that, I'll stop for a minute, update my numbers so that when we go through, it makes sense. And then happy to hear comments or questions or different ideas.
Great, thank you. That was the first thing I was going to ask, was to update the numbers so that we could all refer to things similarly. So discussion. Anyone have anything you want to discuss concerning these recommendations? Commissioner Nelson.
Hey, so with recommendation number 3, with regard to the training and requiring agents have some sort of like general industry certification, I think that's a really great idea. I guess I'm just trying to think how this is going to be implemented, who's going to be responsible for it, like does the CCB actually, if the CCB is responsible for providing this training, do they actually have the resources to do this? And how often are these agents going to need to go through training?
So great questions, and I left it intentionally vague.
Okay.
So I don't think that's something that, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Like you said, there's different ways of going about it for. So I left that up to the board. So like under methods to meet the recommendation, does the board want to develop their own, or there's already methods or there's already trainings in place? Do they just want to say, pick an approved training and show us your certificate from it, and that suffices this requirement? I'm not sure what they would prefer to do. Again, I don't know their resources or capacity for implementing something like this. That's a good point. I didn't say when it should renew. I don't know if we want to model it after alcohol awareness card. Our food handler cards, I think, are 3 years or 5 years. I mean, we can certainly decide to put an expiration on the certification.
Oh, sorry. So the current industry requirements have everybody get an agent card. So we have to go through background checks. They recently changed it from being a 1-year minimum to 2-year, just because 1 year was a lot. So I'm not sure if it's something that could go along with that. But back to the actual training requirement, though, Are there any other states that have cannabis, like industry-wide training recommendations or regulations that you're aware of that we could maybe model this after?
Maybe Chair Pearson found some in her research. I didn't specifically look for this kind of training. What I did was modeled it after the requirements for alcohol.
Okay.
And I know Commissioner Hayes mentioned that there were not state specific, but like industry pushed trainings that are available. But certainly something that we can look into more.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't found anything myself, but I haven't looked. I think that at this point, it's okay for us to say, here's the things we think are important for these trainings to hit for public health reasons. How they're going to achieve this is up to them. And whether they're going to achieve this is also up to them, right? We can just make the case that, you know, for example, methods of identifying overconsumption would be good for everybody, good for public health, good for the lounges, good for the customer. You know, this is something that I think we can all get on board with. How they're going to do it. Fortunately, there are skilled people at CCB who can look at other states and learn from their experiences as well. And you know, they'll figure out the details. And I'm sure they'll come back to us if they need further advice.
Hi,
Okay,
it's
with the
Teresa.
vagueness.
Yeah, last time when I presented California's and Colorado's that had a really nice inclusive list of those topics that, you know, they felt should be trained on over a period of time.
Do they
So I
actually
think-
have like trainings though? I guess I'm just looking for if there's like something that we can present to them being like, hey, this has been a successful model in this other state. And because I think it's a really great idea to have like a baseline industry training requirement. I've looked into it a little bit and it doesn't really seem like there's much out there, even though there should be. But it's just a matter of if Nevada has the capacity of creating something like this. That's, I guess, my only point. So.
Seems like a great business opportunity for somebody.
I found a lot of them out there that were already pushing, you know, cannabis training for people who worked in these facilities. And I thought that, you know, based on my review of them, I thought they were really well thought out.
So it sounds like there is stuff out there, and you know, I might reach out to members of the board or of the commission just to get some examples that perhaps we can highlight when I summarize our discussion. What I want to, you know, I like the idea of highlighting potential models or potential programs, but I also recognize that this is personally not an area of my own expertise, and so, you know, on the individual level, I am reluctant to say this is the one you should use because I don't feel like I have the level of expertise to do that yet. But I would be open to the CCB staff coming back to us and saying, here's a few we're considering, which ones do you like?
Right, and I will share that at the state level, we require something called a certified food manager. And what we do here at the state is somebody comes to us with a training, we look at it and to see if it is appropriate training, and then we'll put it on a list of approved programs, and then they can choose from that list and go and take any variety of classes that they would like.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been reviewed by us for completeness, you know, of what we think should be under certified food manager training. And I think that will be a great way to go. Have a lot of different people be able to put their program up for recommendation and just provide a list of optional trainings, whether it be in class or online or a combination of the above.
Right. Yeah. Commissioner Chu.
Hi. Yeah, I think the last recommendation was something about delaying the ready to consume items for a while. And I think was that mainly for regulatory agencies to develop report regs and train staff on this? I'm a little concerned about that, just in that I understand there's a concern about having inspectors trained for these different areas to be able to do this. But I think we're only talking about 40 potential new businesses across the state. I think there's 20, I can't remember the regulations, I think it's like 20 independent lounges and 20 that can be connected to a dispensary.
Just to clarify, this is for TCS foods, not ready to eat foods. So I'm not promoting postponing ready to eat foods at all. So like gummies and things that are already manufactured, totally fine. This is for cooked on site TCS foods. So if they're planning to cook a chicken or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but my naive interpretation is that we're talking essentially about 40 new restaurants potentially statewide, or 40, new businesses that allow smoking for the air quality side of this. And so I'm talking about just the number of potential businesses that have been authorized in this bill. And if we do go down the route of a team inspection, where right now, CCB handles anything associated with, tracking the cannabis or the potency side of this thing, and then you have, the health departments, dealing with food safety for 40 new restaurants, and then you have another one who, in the area of air quality, that's essentially, 40 small businesses that allow smoking. Is that really as large of a hurdle as we think it is, or is that something that could be worked into the existing staffing or with minimal increase in staff?
So based on our experiences with opening a manufactured food establishment, opening these food establishments will be the initial hurdle. And so there are plan reviews and records reviews and documents reviews and label reviews that all have to be done. I mean, once you get a business opened, it's annual inspections and complaint inspections. But opening those first 40 would be a hurdle. It would be a significant hurdle getting them open. And then after that, there's annual inspections. We also have to remember that 40 of these statewide, there are significant driving distances. Depending on where your staff are located, I have staff behind a windshield 6 to 8 hours to get to their first inspection. So that presents another hurdle, especially if you have a small core group of cadre of inspectors doing these kinds of inspections. Just the logistics, getting the team together and getting them there can be a hurdle.
Commissioner Dupree, do you have any response to either one of those comments?
Yeah, I think, again, we're in a tricky situation because we don't understand who will be responsible for what. I think Commissioner Chu, what you proposed is an option that the CCB might go for. I think they are going to get significant pushback from the local and state health authorities in terms of capacity and resources, like Commissioner Hayes mentioned and was mentioned in public comment previously. So personally, I think this is a better recommendation if we're planning to keep it all within CCB. I think this makes the most sense. But that's why we're here to vote. I think that we could put forth both recommendations and leave it to CCB to decide how they want to really divide the labor of these inspections.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to also, I'd like to hear your all thoughts about is what I'm hearing is there's concerns about staffing and capacity, but there's also concerns about kind of, I don't know if skill is the right word, but not really knowing how to appropriately inspect cannabis infused foods that are made on site. That there seems to be an additional level of things that we kind of don't know yet. So, and I think we could know what we don't know yet. Like, I think it just might take additional research and training, and, you know, the CCB is going to have to go deep on this. I know that there definitely have been resources offered to us via public comment that, you know, we are aware of and CCB is aware of. So I kind of like, I hear what everyone is saying, and I like, part of me, I could go either way, honestly. Commissioner Nelson, you have something you want to add?
I guess I just wanted a little bit of clarification on this section here, because so I understand the value of postponing TCS foods. With regard to general servings, though, is this going to still allow, does this recommendation still allow for consumption lounges to prepare more simple foods on site, or does this possibly restrict them to only serving prepackaged edibles that were manufactured and tested by a separate production facility? So I guess that's just my point that I'm looking for a little bit more detail on.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to allow the kind of the happy medium there. So maybe they're doing baked goods on site. Maybe it's like coffee shop style, where they're serving on site. It doesn't have to be prepackaged. I think it's reasonable to allow for open food preparation at the lounge, but not necessarily TCS food preparation. So I think the full service cooking and stuff, there's just so much that goes into it. But I think that a happy compromise would be open food preparation within the lounge that doesn't include TCS foods.
So for those of us who are not inspectors, I just Googled TCS foods. So time or temperature controlled for safety foods. So we're talking about foods that could potentially, you know, if they were undercooked, could give someone salmonella, for example.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Food out of temperature,
Mhm.
food not held appropriately, either hot or cold, food not cooked to a proper temperature, you know, storage, so that, you know, if you have, you know, eggs and fish and chicken and ground beef, storage in a particular, you know, top-down mechanism, so that, you know, if one drips on the other has the higher cook temperature, so that you kill all the passages from the fish to the ground beef, because now you're cooking ground beef at 155. That is all the idea behind TCS, time and temperature control.
Right. So when you're saying open preparation, what do you mean by that?
So it could look like a bakery, cookies, muffins, things like that, which you can get pretty extensive within the baked world. It could look like a coffee shop with, you know, banana breads, bagels, things like that. And let's see what also doesn't require TCS foods. The cream cheese would
Essentially
be
anything
TCS.
that doesn't need to be refrigerated or served hot, like as long as it can sit out on the counter for, you know, X amount of time and it's okay, like that's what would be permissible under this model, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So whatever you could produce that like wouldn't require a refrigerator.
Okay. Does that
Shelf
also apply to
stable foods.
ingredients?
Shelf stable foods. I didn't hear the other. That's right. I didn't hear the other thing that was mentioned.
Oh, sorry. So would that also apply to then ingredients? So like would, you know, using eggs in a bakery to make cookies or brownies or something of the like, would those TCS ingredients fall under the limitations of the foods here?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because if that's the case, essentially all these are going to be vegan places. So
That's a good point. I mean, maybe we could put in, that's a good point.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, that's essentially what our company is already doing, and we use ingredients such as liquid eggs. They do have to be pasteurized eggs per the existing NCCR regulations, but we do use perishable ingredients, and we do, you know, produce products that are shelf stable. So I think it would be reasonable to allow a consumption lounge to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
The other
I
thing
agree.
too is like if you're going to have a consumption lounge infused product with canna butter, for instance, canna butter can't be left out on it can't be held at a room temperature. It has to be cold. It kind of falls into that same sort of, and I might be speaking out of text when I say this, but I believe garlic butter is also one of those products that has to be, it's a butter that is infused with plant material. It has to be refrigerated because there's risk of botulism. But yeah, I would see that consumption lounges could have the same sort of preparation needs using canna butter to infuse products. So just putting that out there.
But at some point, there should be a way to, you know, even if that, I'm just going to pick a brownie because you put eggs in brownies, right? It's been a while since I cooked brownie. You put eggs in brownies.
Yep.
You do that somewhere else, and then they purchase that product and then take it to the cannabis consumption lounge where it is already that shelf-stable product. Maybe it's not a fresh baked shelf-stable product, but we could do them separately. You know, I see that being doable.
So you're suggesting that it would be produced at a production facility, tested, and then sold to a consumption lounge where it could then be served?
Yes.
Or it would be produced as a consumption lounge only? Sorry.
I think the first option. I liked your first option.
Okay.
Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I think, well, first off, just that last point, and I'll go through that in mind, but the regulations state it has to go through the dispensary before going to the consumption lounge. Just the
Right.
point there. And then I'm just wondering if instead of a blanket postponement of this, could we phrase it that, hey, there are certain hurdles at each level that you have to clear, right? And, you know, so, you know, the first hurdle is, you know, if you're only planning to have, you know, an area where you can vape or, you know, eat packaged, you know, foods, this is the level that you have to clear in order to be permitted to do that. And then as you add on and plan for these other things, you know, getting your full kitchen in place, getting all your staff trained for all this stuff, you can then submit and say, okay, I'd like to expand my permit or whatever you want to call it to include, you know, these prepared foods, and just do that in a tiered state, as opposed to saying, you know, no, we're not going to allow this for 6 months or whatever, but just put in, just define or help the CCB define what these hurdles are that need to be done, and so they can prepare at the same time.
So what you're saying is that we could consider kind of a TCS, I don't know if license is the right word, but that this would be considered kind of the most advanced version of a consumption lounge because of the requirements for training on the consumption lounge side. I think an additional concern, though, that I'm hearing from Commissioners Dupree and Hayes is that the state might not have, and from public comment, is that the state might not have adequate resources to support that. Now, if there's only a few places that are at the point where they're going to need inspections, then that might be okay. I still, though, I'm kind of worrying with the, you know, capacity versus knowledge, which I think that's still an issue. Do we know even what we need to inspect when it comes to cannabis infused foods that are prepared on site? I don't know that we do. But you know, again, I think I can summarize all of this. This is all really good information for the CCB. Commissioner Nelson, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I kind of just was trying to piece together some of the stuff that Ben was saying, and I'm trying to make sure that I understand this right. But you're essentially suggesting that instead of just having a blanket postponement of any TCS foods, that consumption lounges need to apply for a permit to serve these foods at their location, and this is something that could be opened up down the line, right?
Right. I would I guess my, the way I'm thinking about this would be more like, okay, let's say you have a restaurant and they open up and they don't have an alcohol permit. And so let's say like a year goes by and say, okay, I like to serve alcohol now. You can add on to that, say, okay, here are the hurdles I need to jump through in order to be able to serve alcohol. We can do that. So I'm kind of looking at it as more of a tiered approach as opposed to restricting things a little too tightly with some timelines that, we don't know how long it would take, or I'm not even sure if the government agencies know how long it would take. But I think we can put that in there and just say, then we can get an idea of who's looking for what. Whether that opens the state up to some issues of, 3 places are saying, I'm ready to go right now. I've got all this training in here and you're holding me up. That's a different question. But I'm just wondering if that makes a little more sense than putting some harder timeframes in here.
No, I think that's a really great idea. And then it just kind of makes it to where consumption lounges can open up and they can be operational, and then graduate into preparing and serving like more complex edible infused foods down the line. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest a rephrasing of this so that we could agree on a recommendation. And to make it more general, we could say something like, separate licenses, permits, whatever the right word is, for prepared food from TCS foods. And depending on state capacity, those kind of more advanced or graduated permits, well, how do I say this? Like those permits should be based on state capacity and public health considerations, having to do with, all the things that Commissioner Dupree has outlined here. So it's not necessarily a hard and fast postpone. It's just a separate process. Recognizing that this is kind of an order, this is kind of a, an additional level of difficulty when it comes to both inspections and
maybe just sort of list what the criteria are at each tier. And that's to be determined by
right to be
the agencies.
Determined by the CCB. Yeah. So what do you think about that, Commissioner Dupree?
I have kind of 2 thoughts. One is that I don't know that it addresses that inspection staff need more time to identify what will be required or not in these TCS foods, or for facilities using TCS foods.
Yeah.
If they have to write their own new set of regs, whether you have a tiered permit or not, like they're going to have to wait anyway.
Right.
And also I think that something to consider in terms of, if you're thinking about like graduating the permits where there might be this option and this option and then this option. We see this a lot on the food side of things, is people open up planning to just do this much and get a specific permit because we have risk-based permits. So a permit that allows them to do this, and then they want to expand their menu, and then they get mad at us because now they need a new permit. So they have to go back through plan review. They have to go back through the registration fees, and then they plan to again extend their menu, and they wind up spending far more money because we've created a tiered approach than to just, these are the regulations, stay within them, and do what you want to do as long as it's within that. So I don't want to set up CCB to have a very tricky to maneuver process regarding permitting, because we get a lot of confusion about that on our side of things.
Okay, how about this summary? Because I think this is all really valuable. Even more broad is simply the subcommittee recognizes that there are separate public health concerns for TCS foods compared to prepackaged, ready to consume foods. And that given the concerns of both, we're not 100% sure that we think there's going to be probably new regulations that need to be written. There's, been public comment about resources concerns. There's just so much that might need to be done in order to safely roll out TCS foods at the consumption lounge level, that we recommend that CCB consider these types of foods separately. And however, there's lots of different ways to do that. And I can summarize what we've talked about here as pros and cons. And yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, maybe just I agree with that. A recommendation to specifically address the concerns regarding service of TCS foods. And then we can work with them to elaborate on what that might look like down the road. But just so that we're getting to the CCB, that there's a lot to consider here and there's various ways to address it. And it's probably going to need a little more discussion.
Yeah, with lots of different stakeholders across the state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's got to be a way to do this.
So I'll make a new recommendation.
Okay.
I'm just going to make a new slide. I don't want to delete all of that.
For sure.
I'll do this.
And Commissioner Hayes, do you have something to add?
I will agree with much of what Mr. Preet said about, the growth of food facilities. They start out with a vision and then that vision grows. Mm-hmm. There is also some benefit to having multiple layers, ready to eat, deli style, everything cold, nothing reheated, based on risk category. Because if you have a problem in one section, you can close TCS foods and still have a permit to do ready to eat foods, or all of those cold sandwiches, or salads or things like that. You can keep one part of the business going while closing another and not truly affecting, their income streams. So there is some benefit to having multiple permit levels that they can have all at one time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. I love this conversation. I think it's been very informative. I'm also looking at the time. I know I promised that we wouldn't use all of our time, but we're on the way to probably using all of our time. So Commissioner DePreet's going to reformulate this and make it a little bit more broad, and then I will summarize what we talked about. Address the specific concerns for lounges serving TCS foods as defined by FDA separately. Yeah. Okay. What do folks think about that wording?
I'm sorry, I'm on mute. Can you add the words by risk level?
By risk level. Mm-hmm.
Where?
How about just to the end of the sentence?
Sure.
Address the specific concerns of TCS foods by risk level, but aren't TCS foods their own, all one risk level? I think the request is to say, hey, TCS foods are kind of tricky. Let's address them separately. Mm-hmm. Not create risks within them yet. I think that's more detail than we want to add.
I'm on mute. I agree. You can take that out.
I see what you're saying, though. We want it to be risk-based.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Okay.
Are there any other recommendations that we want to discuss? There was just one clarification that I wanted to make for the reporting of employee illness. Is this illnesses that are, is this every single possible illness? So someone calls in with a headache. Is that something that you would log?
No, you're right. So it should be these foodborne illnesses.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you want me to, I can write them out specifically?
Or just
These
clarify
5
that they're the,
symptoms.
the
Yeah.
foodborne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
If they
that's
report any of those symptoms, then
Yep. Due to foodborne illness symptoms.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah,
Because they could be confirmed salmonella or something. So if they are confirmed salmonella or symptoms of salmonella, they should be logged. Okay.
yeah, we want to know that certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't need to get into anybody's chronic health issues or anything
No.
like that for sure.
So anything else people want to pull out for discussion or clarification? All right. So yeah, maybe we could just blow through these quickly. So log customer illness, and then post the health policy as recommendation 2. Recommendation 3 is to log employee illnesses. 4 is some sort of cannabis training hitting these top level topics. 5 is food handler card. 6 is certified food
Protection manager.
Thank you. We would like to see the consumption lounges have written plans for these potentially dangerous situations. And then number 8 is just adopting food regulations using the FDA code. So just kind of, regulating cannabis consumption lounge food similarly to what we do other food. And then recommendation 9 is, and oh, by the way, TCS foods are an extra level of kind of difficulty, or they're extra complicated. So you're going to want to consider these regulating and licensing these foods potentially differently than you do the prepackaged foods. And then recommendation 10 is that customers should bring in their own devices. Staff will verify that they are empty, or everything should be single use. I should clarify that as of right now, there is no carry out allowed. So, and that's in the legislation. I do, other commissions have discussed whether that encourages overconsumption. And I think it does if there's no changes to packaging, size. I think it could, but that's kind of another topic for another day.
Maybe I'll leave that in there then in case they change it.
Yeah, I'll leave it in there for now. Yeah. So I'm going to ask, would anyone like to move to vote on these recommendations as a whole?
Do I second that motion?
You have to move first.
Okay, I'd like to move to vote on the recommendation.
As a whole, or
as a or by one by one. I'm sorry, I'm doing this wrong.
So my question to all of you is, would you like to go one by one or as a whole?
I'd like to move to vote one by one.
You would like to move to vote one by one. Okay, do I have a second?
I second that.
Okie dokie.
This is Teresa.
Thank you. So let's go with recommendation number 1. All those in, well, I think I actually need another.
So if I just say, I move to recommendation 1 about logging customer illness.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Everyone seconds that. Okay, but Teresa Hayes is who I heard. Well, first we have to vote. So everyone in favor, please raise your hand. And Commissioner Dupree, I'm just going to assume that
I don't know how to do it while I'm sharing screen.
That's okay. This works too. I see your hand. All right. So I see all the commissioners in favor of that. Let's move on to number 2.
I move to adopt recommendation 2 about posting a health policy for employees.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Great. Everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Please lower your hand. See everybody voted for that one.
And then
Um,
I move to recommend recommendation 3 about logging employee illness.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Great. Everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see everyone in favor. Thank you.
I move for recommendation 4 to require cannabis training.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Great. Everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Great. I see everyone in favor.
I move to adopt recommendation 5 to require a food handler card or equivalent.
I second.
Everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see everyone in favor. Oh, nope, I'm sorry. I don't see Commissioner Hayes. Did you raise your hand for that and I missed it? Or,
No, I did not raise my hand for that.
okay. Do you want to just briefly tell us why you do not support this one?
Southern Nevada Health District is the only jurisdiction that I know that requires a food handler card. Most other jurisdictions do not have the ability to do this. It would
Okay.
have to be internal because it's not national. And so it's just not possible for everyone.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Could we change that to say if local governments, if local jurisdictions allow it
Or require it for,
or require it?
Well, and this does have the option for a non-health department issued food handler card.
So like a ServSafe food handler certification?
Exactly.
I can
So
clarify.
isn't that covered by the previous recommendation of certified food manager? That's the ServSafe. So what's the difference between ServSafe and your food handler card?
So ServSafe has the 2 options. The later recommendation is saying that at all hours of operation, one person needs to have a ServSafe or ANSI equivalent food protection manager certification. This is saying that all folks who are handling the food have to have the food handler training, whether that's through ServSafe or through your health department. So this is for everybody who works there. The later one is for one person per shift.
Yeah, I'm still not good with that.
Okay, I can just summarize concerns about capacity and talk about, Southern Nevada versus everyone else. And then, highlight the ServSafe, et cetera. I will do that. All right, let's go on to the next one.
So I move for recommendation 6, requiring a certified food protection manager at all hours of operation.
I second.
All right, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. I see everyone in favor.
So I move to adopt recommendation 7 regarding written plans.
I second.
Everyone in favor, please raise your hand. All right, I see everyone in favor.
I move to adopt recommendation 8 for CCB to adopt appropriate food regulations.
I second.
Everyone in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, I see everyone in favor.
I move to adopt recommendation 9 to encourage CCB to address TCS food concerns separately.
I second.
Everyone in favor, please raise your hands. All right, I see everyone in favor.
And I move to adopt recommendation 10 regarding devices.
I second.
All right, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, everyone in favor. Great. Thank you, Commissioner Dupree.
Thank you. I also wanted to note, this didn't make it to the agenda, but we have received the report from the Public Health Law Center that was looking at the NCIAA and the consumption lounges. So we have the results of their report. I don't think we can discuss it today, but I can forward it to you, Chair Pearson, and do with that what you will.
Thank you. I received it from the Southern
Oh, okay.
district as well. And I have one recommendation that kind of takes that into account.
Perfect.
So we'll hit, I think that's like my last recommendation. So that'll be the last thing we talk about today. I'm looking at the time. Would folks like a 10-minute break? Yep. Okay, great. So we will reconvene at 11:45. All right, it's 11:45. All right. So now we're going to move on to Commissioner Chu's section on ready to consume products. Just to give everyone a heads up, we have an hour and 15 minutes left and 3 sections. So I'm okay with what we've done so far because we started with, we flipped the order of conversation. So, I wanted to give those first 2 sections more conversation, and personally, my air quality regulations have not changed much. So, but just keep that in mind as we go about the rest of these sections. All right, Commissioner Chu, take it away.
All right. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint now? Hopefully. Yep. Okay, good. All right. So instead of jumping into the regulations first, I was kind of wanted to address some things that I guess from last time, some questions that came up in that discussion. So I looked up in the regulations for things. So AB 341 just says, you have retail independent ones. Only difference is that one's attached, one's not attached. It allows single-use cannabis products or ready-to-consume cannabis products. Ready to consume, that by definition is prepared on premises, presented in form of food, or beverage, sold in heated or unheated, and intended for immediate consumption. Single use is basically anything else that the board says you can consume. Section 22 of this one says that the lounge has to submit a plan to the board, setting for protocols and procedures to ensure that these products are not sold or otherwise distributed. And that's where some of this question came off of it, in the cannabis lounge other than as authorized in this chapter. And so one question that popped up to me when I read this is, does this mean no sharing? Or if it says, as authorized in this chapter, can CCB authorize sharing of products? And then just as a point came up last week, that the purchasing limit at dispensaries are for possession, not consumption. So it's just how much can you have on your person at that time. So a cannabis consumption lounge can sell food and beverages, can sell any other item that does not contain cannabis products. So this is a question that came up last time is, could you sell, a soft drink or whatever that wasn't infused water, things like that? And the answer is yes. You can sell non-infused items, but then you still need to have appropriate permits and inspections. We discussed that in the previous sections there as to what you would need for what's being sold. You cannot allow, so this shall not allow consumption of any cannabis product in the consumption lounge that is not a single-use cannabis product or ready-to-consume cannabis product, okay, or a single-use or ready-to-use consume cannabis product that was purchased at the lounge to be removed. So it cannot be removed from the lounge. So this is why you can't take home any leftovers. Let's talk about retail. It just says you must obtain this from the retail store that you're connected to. You can sell the single-use products, and you can sell, you can prepare ready-to-use, products there. And that they have to ensure that only products that were purchased from the cannabis consumption lounge are consumed in the lounge. So this would mean no outside infused products can come into the lounge. Section 27 is essentially the same thing, it just talks about the independent ones. So the independent ones just have to purchase it from another dispensary if they're not connected to. But essentially it's the same thing. So single use. So no leftovers can leave the lounge because essentially that would turn this into a dispensary that allows consumption. So could this lead to overindulging? Not getting your money's worth? I know that's been discussed here. It's been discussed at other places as well. So that is a question there as to, what would that lead to? Section 22 is items are not sold or otherwise distributed. So again, this is about the sharing. My interpretation of this one and my understanding is that the distribution part of it was likely the intent was for black market items. So I'm kind of advocating for allow sharing if the item was legally obtained at the lounge. So for instance, there could be things like, I go in there, hey, I'm a beginner at this. I only want a 5 milligram dose. You're only selling 10 milligram doses. The person I came in with also wants to try out a little less on that one. We're just going to do half and half on this one. There, you can certainly have couples packages. You're going to run into this issue of, hey, this tastes pretty good. Why don't you taste this? And other types of discounts you might have for a group. These are all different types of marketing things, and I think that's kind of the reason why maybe you want to be able to allow some limited sharing. Multi-serving prepackaged items, predominantly in the industry, we're talking about 100 milligram totals per item. So this is a large candy bar. They are scored or marked in ways to tell you where the single servings are. If you were to sell that directly to a consumer, that would likely result in some sort of sharing and possibly overindulgence. But I'm kind of advocating this one that, for cost and for packaging type things, the lounge could purchase a multi-serving item from a dispensary, so a whole candy bar, but they would resell it in individual portions. So for instance, the soft chews, those often come in 10 packs that are available there. And you would just sell a 10 milligram piece to the consumer. And I liken this to, you go to a bakery, you go to a pizza parlor, you say, hey, I just want a slice of pizza, or I want a slice of the cake that's in the display. You're not selling the entire cake. And part of this one, there'd be no limit to what they can order, or we'll talk about this a little bit later, I think something else, but it becomes a conscious decision to purchase it, which says, hey, I really want, 5 10 milligram pieces. And they have to actually just say that, as opposed to selling them a 100 milligram bar, whether or not they say, oh, this, a lot of times, these taste really, really good. They're going to just keep eating and eating and eating. And I think that's one of the things that was brought up a couple of years ago, when they, if they come into, someone's hotel room for whatever reason, and they see, wrappers from, a THC product in there or whatever, they don't want it to be an accidental overdose. They must say, okay, this person had to actively decide, I'm going to unwrap this next piece, eat that one, and go from there. So it's putting a little bit more on the consumer as to how much they are going to consume on that one. And also, this would avoid producers having to deal with additional SKUs or packaging and labeling, one little soft chew, things like that. So just trying to deal with the environmental waste that it would produce if you force them to do this one. And certainly, multi-serving prepackaged items may be cheaper per serving for the lounge to purchase, and that would help their profit margins a little bit onto there. This does raise a question as to whether or not medical patients can order higher dosage prepackaged items. And could sharing these items lead to problems? And would you consider if they shared a medical item to a recreational customer, would that be distribution? So I think just need some consideration of that. Vape cartridges, that's a little bit trickier in that your standard vape cartridge holds half a gram of oil. That is a lot of doses in there. 30, 50, puffs on that into there. I did talk to some people. They said, yeah, you can actually fill them with smaller amounts, in there. That is a packaging and labor costs, definitely an increase there. And so certainly, if you put in, a tenth of a gram into there, would be difficult to dilute that oil down because then it will start leaking from the cartridge. It has to be a certain viscosity in order to stay in that cartridge. So that's just something to think about there. We discussed this on the last one, which was if you bring your own pen, showing it's empty upon entering, purchase cartridges, discard leftovers leaving. Enforcement of this could be difficult, as you can easily just slip this into your pocket. But I think we voted on this in the last one, and so Commissioner DeFreet came up with the same idea for that as well. For outside items being brought in, so it has to have been purchased at the lounge, that's section 25 and 27. And then, as I said, it has to come directly through a dispensary. The lounge cannot purchase directly from cultivation or production according to the regulations. And then the consumer cannot buy it at a dispensary and bring it in. That's pretty cut and dry in the regulations. And the reason is, how do you control the source of the product? And if somebody were to bring in something, that they purchase on the black market, and it was tainted, and they have some sort of a event, happening there, then how do you trace this back and see what is happening onto there? And again, enforcement of this can be difficult for smaller items that people just have in their pockets, but ready to consume is prepared on site and infused on site. Look at the testing side of this one. No lifters can leave. And the question is, could this be shared? And we started talking about hookahs last time, which was you typically share that from a single source. So if that's allowed, is that really any different from sharing a dish? And as I said, it's going to be really hard to enforce this. Again, it's sitting at a table, someone's going to say, hey, taste this, and people are going to, any normal restaurants, we often have that, person A is going to order one thing, person B is going to order something else, and they're going to share and split it off. So that's just something to consider there. Dosage, if a customer requires a higher dosage, is this going to cause a problem with sharing, again, with a medical or an experienced recreational user? Last week talked about testing. If it's prepackaged, obtained by the lounge from the dispensary, then it's already tested by the labs. There's no further testing is required. So that's pretty straightforward. If it's ready to consume fresh on site, we talked about having an oil that was prepared, individual dosage of that. So 10 milligrams per dose. Those are all pre-tested by the labs, and the consumer can order multiple doses. And again, there's a question, should there be a maximum dosage allowed? We can discuss that. And then that oil would have been tested for the full standard edible testing for the oil. So it would be consistent with all other edibles. And then it's added, they purchase the number of doses they want. It's added at the end of the cooking process. So stability, microbial issues, your standard food safety is all for standard restaurant level food preparation at that point. And then you're adding at the end so it doesn't, right before serving. So it's not should not cause any issues with, food safety at that point. That should not have already been addressed earlier. And there'll be no need to test that final product or the recipe associated with that. So recommendation number 1 are the prepackaged items. I would recommend they procure multi-serving items from the dispensary, but resell individual pieces if they want to. The maximum number of pieces sold is only limited by the possession limit. Metric may need some modification to allow selling of fractional units. So that's something they would need to address with Metric. And then medical items would need some sort of tighter control over sharing to avoid overindulgence. And then it's just basically following standard food safety protocols. You're handling money, you're handling food, resealing the original package to retain quality and cleanliness, and no additional testing is required. Recommendation number 2 for ready to consume. Again, this was the single dosage 10 milligram oils, has to go through the lounge to the dispensary, adding those at the end, notifying the consumer what part of the dish is infused, having the allergen information on the menu. And then the question out there was, should there be an expiration date for the oil? Whether that's 6 months or a year? I think that's up for debate as for that. For sharing or external items, I would say allow limited sharing of items in the lounge with consideration for transmission of germs. Whether or not, sharing a vape pen is probably not a great idea at this day and age. But, if other than that, here's part of whatever I bought. And you cannot bring anything from outside on this. So that's pretty cut and dry. Leftovers cannot be removed. Again, flour and vape may be sold in smaller quantities to minimize waste and overindulgence. So kind of just recalibrating what size people would use in a single sitting under there. Storage and disposal. All disposal must meet the same standards as any other cannabis facility. The THC products must be made non-usable before disposal. Currently, that's bans, other products that they mix it into for the existing regulations, and then all the security requirements for that would be, alarm cameras, lock storage, including the dumpsters. So we can open this up for any discussion.
Great, thank you. Covered a lot. Thank you for addressing some of those existing questions that we had. Are there any questions on specific recommendations? Commissioner Dupree.
Can you go to recommendation 2, please?
Sure.
I just want to read it real quick. Allow customer to request the dosage they want, notify the consumer of what's infused. So I would recommend adding to this recommendation. I know that we had a discussion last time about having a way to identify at time of service how much is in each dish, right? Because we were concerned about like accidentally mixing them up at service. So whether they decide to put a sticker on a dish or, you know, it comes with something, but some way to identify the dose at time of service, just to prevent any mixing up.
Okay, that's good. Yep, thank you. I forgot about that one.
And Commissioner Nelson.
Hey, okay, so since we're on recommendation number 2, I just want to point out a logistics issue that might be a problem with the recommendation of easily dispensed single dose 10 milligram oil. Okay. So if a consumption lounge is buying a kilo of oil and say that that oil is like 90% THC, you're talking about something that they would need, I think I think I did the math on this, but breaking a kilo of oil down into 10 milligram servings would approximately mean that they would need 90,000 single dose dispensers, which is a lot. I would suggest that we don't go about it this way. Frankly, if a consumption lounge has a precision scale and a calculator, they should be able to calculate doses properly on their own for what they could, you know, dose a product at, and just withdrawing a small amount of oil from a bulk vat, I think would be a lot easier, more efficient, and less wasteful, because trying to send that many 10 milligram serving like syringes or tubes of butter, you name it, I think that that's going to be a big problem. So that was just my commentary on recommendation number 2.
I guess my concern about that one would be, would that allow more potential for error being made, especially if you're using a concentrated oil and of 90%, then you're talking about trying to weigh out, you know, 0.01 grams, as opposed to if you dilute this down and have something that could be easily pushed out of a syringe, you know, say, hey, they want 3 doses of this one, I'm just gonna pull 3 syringes, put it into there. I would not have to worry about that. So I'm kind of trying to take the whole doing the calculation out, if you know what the potency of the oil is, and then running that calculation through there to figure out how much you have to weigh out, and then making sure you have a accurate balance. When you get down to that level, now you're talking about an analytical grade balance, and there are issues with that if that balance gets moved, and how accurate it is, and is it being checked routinely, was my concern about trying to do it at that level. And I think it could run into some issues with accidentally putting in too much or misdosing a product when you're talking about quantities of that small. And 90,000, yes, but I guess the question would be how many, that's 90,000 servings is what we're talking about here, right? Because we're limiting your prepackaged stuff to 10 milligram servings. You can buy multiple ones of there, but I guess, the question is how long would a kilo of oil last?
Would you necessarily need to dilute the whole kilo all at once? Like, would you have to have 90,000 syringes at a time, or could you go off a percentage at a time to send over to the
right? You can make I guess for efficiency of the testing, the limit right now is a producer can make a kilo of oil, and then I think the limit for making a product off of that is however much a kilo will make. So you could make 90,000 10 milligram gummies off of there if you wanted to. and then that would be one production run, and that would be tested by the laboratories. So for efficiency, I guess, if you want to minimize your testing costs, then yes, you would do that if you had a market for the 90,000 individual doses. If you are getting orders in for something that's, they only want, hey, I want 2,000 doses or something like that at a time, that would be up to the producer. Again, this is going through a dispensary, so there's a second layer in there of trying to collect this into that.
Well, then could we possibly do it? I guess like my issue here is the single dose requirement. I think that that makes, I can see some value in that, but I also see that this would just be kind of a problem in the execution of that. So like if we did have, I believe you mentioned before about like, so diluting oils. So like if a producer was to create an infused vegetable oil that was essentially dumbed down to be 10 milligrams per milliliter, and that could be easily measured at the consumption lounge, could that not also be a easier, more effective way of going about this versus having to give a bulk amount of pre-measured syringes and transfer all of those through? Because the other thing too that I'm thinking of here is how inventory would go on this. So if you have a consumption lounge and they have all of these pre-measured doses and they're all 10 milligrams and you've got 90,000 of them, that is a really big problem for inventory control, because tracing all of those individual units would be a struggle. So if you keep things in a bulk vat per se, that could be weighed, it could be easier traced, and I mean, obviously mistakes are going to happen, but I think that that would be a much easier method about enforcing this dosage measuring aspect of this recommendation than requiring all single doses to be presented from producers passing through dispensaries to consumption lounges.
Okay. I can get behind that.
And we can.
I was also wondering. Good.
Well, I was just going to say we can phrase these as may, right? So producers may create pre-measured, easily dispensed. I think the idea is that from a public health perspective, we want something that is easy to dispense, that is a consistent dose, because we want to make sure that people are getting what they think they're getting. And so there are lots of ways to do that, and here are a couple of ways.
Right. And the only other thing I thought was if they were pre-measured here, then could dispensaries sell that to the public if they wanted that? That might be an easier way for that one as another source from there. Because then if this has been pre-tested in those forms, then I don't see any reason why a dispensary couldn't just sell these dosages directly to the public either.
So that would mean that they'd have to be packaged to the child resistant standards.
Right.
So
right. You can put them into something else that's child resistant, right?
Yeah. I guess also too, the other thing that I was thinking about with this was so the whole requirement of consumption lounges acquiring their goods from dispensaries, does that mean that the same sort of child resistant packaging limits are applied to everything that a producer is setting to it, or is making essentially to send to a consumption lounge? I think that's kind of a flag for me, because that could be very problematic, especially if we're going to, if we're talking about sending bulk infusion materials to consumption lounges, there might need to be some sort of exemption of what is required of the packaging of those products to be passed through to get to the consumption lounge ultimately.
Right. That is a good point, in that whether or not this bulk could be sold at a dispensary. That is to begin with.
I think we might need to make a recommendation, and I don't even know if this is a possibility, so I apologize for my ignorance in this suggestion, but I think that we do need to recommend that producers and cultivators can sell directly to consumption lounges for the sake of bulk transfers. Passing materials through a dispensary, I think would be I see a lot of room for problems there, and it would be just more efficient for the industry to go directly from a producer to a consumption lounge and just kind of isolate that down to where there's less hands transferring this and less manifests that need to be made.
So this would be a regulation change, because right now it specifically states it has to come through a dispensary. So allowed. Do you want to transfer just the bulk material? Or
I would say transfers in general, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the consumption lounges may eventually not be connected to dispensaries, right? They might be independent.
There are independent ones and there are other ones. Yes, the ones that are connected.
Okay, yeah. So I think that that's definitely a logistics issue that needs to be addressed. Because an independent consumption lounge may have difficulty acquiring from a dispensary directly. I mean, obviously, dispensaries and consumption lounges attached to them won't have the same restrictions or limitations, but it may be something that just needs to be addressed. That's all. Sorry. Okay.
I mean, the other issue that it kind of brings up too, if you're going from a dispensary to the lounges, is this another tier of taxation? Kind of didn't want to bring that up, but that's
true.
Every transfer causes a taxation on here, and whether or not that's going to do that.
I think just for the purpose of time, I'm going to ask us to get back in, because this is kind of recent. It's practical, but it's you know, and just this conversation makes me think that it's just highlighting again the kind of extra level of difficulty when it comes to foods prepared on site, right? Because we're talking about oils for supplementing ready to consume. There's just a lot to consider here, and that's what I'm going to convey to the Cannabis Advisory Commission as a whole.
Okay.
Are there any other comments on these recommendations?
I just want to put a comment that I think that restricting doses or pieces to 10 milligrams per consumer, I think that's going to be a problem, because some consumers may just order excessive amounts of doses to get what they want. Like somebody who normally doses at 50 milligrams shouldn't have to order 5 servings or 5 plates in order to get what their dose is. But that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I think it would be okay as long as they're not being penalized in price, right? So if it's just a standard amount and you say, I want 50 milligrams, and then you get charged for 50 milligrams versus, 10. What I like about this recommendation is excuse me, that we're not selling people 100 milligrams, regardless of how much they want to eat. So, someone who wants a 50, I guess if someone who wants 10 milligrams and someone wants 50 milligrams, if the price is relative to milligram dosage, that seems fine to me. Is there
outside of pricing though? So if you're talking about limiting it 10 milligrams per piece or 10 milligrams per plate, so that means if I want a 50 milligram dose, I'm going to have to order 5 servings of a product and eat 5 servings of them, even though one piece of little would be plenty.
Got it. Yep, I can see that. Maybe
if you have a medical card, you can get higher dosage items. And I guess I'm just saying it's the multi-serving items in the century. Like the state has already defined one serving is 10 milligrams per item for recreational. That's kind of out there in the regulations right now. And we're saying you can order more than just the one if you wanted to. But it's not going to change, the amount of THC versus how much sugar you are ingesting if you order more pieces or if you order, half of a chocolate bar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, that's how it is anyway, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, any other one you want to discuss? Sorry.
Nope, I was going to ask the same thing.
Okay.
Okay,
Should
well
we-
then, seeing no other discussion points, I am going to ask for someone to move to either approve them all in one vote or to go by recommendation. So I'll go with whatever you guys want to do.
Hi, it's Teresa. Make a motion to go by one.
Okey-doke. You have a second?
I'll second it.
Great. So for recommendation number 1, Commissioner Chu, do you want to move to?
Sure. I will move to approve recommendation number 1.
Have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 4 out of 5, and Commissioner Nelson, your not voting for it is for the reason that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, I think the limitations of only serving 10 milligrams on a plate to consumers, I think that's going to be a disservice to the industry and the capacity of what a consumption lounge should be able to do. But that's just me.
Okey-doke, yep, I can convey that. Very good. Let's go on to number 2.
So I move to approve recommendation number 2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see all commissioners in favor. Very good. Let's go on to 3.
I move to approve recommendation number 3.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. I see everyone in favor. Okay. Recommendation number 4.
I move to approve recommendation number 4.
Do I have a second? No one wants to second this one?
I'll second.
All right, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. 3, 4. Okay, I see Commissioner DePreet. Can you give us a reason why you don't want to vote for this one?
Yeah, I just think it's unnecessary because it's already in the law, but also I think that there might be discussion about allowing leftovers, which I would support.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I would support leftovers as well. I don't see any public health reason not to allow them. Okay. Let's go on to recommendation number 5.
Okay. I move to approve recommendation number 5.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Great, I see everyone in favor. And then finally, recommendation number 6.
I move to approve recommendation number 6.
I'll second.
Okay, everyone in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see everybody. Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Commissioner Chu.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Nelson. You're muted, just by the way.
Sorry, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So following on to a lot of the stuff that I proposed last time, essentially the recommendation would be to keep the notices and disclosures similar or the same as what is required at dispensaries. Benefits of this is that it maintains industry consistency and it's really beneficial to public education. We could use some of the basic or the basis of the NCCRs to establish this, but there are some changes that would need to be made or expanded upon. So essentially, this is what I've come up with based upon everyone's feedback from last time, but we're addressing disclosures that would be either passed out to people or posted on the walls of consumption lounges or posted on the menus. It's talking about like the onset of edibles the onset of edibles being delayed, recommending people consume 10 milligrams to start, and also certain amounts of warnings with regard to hazards of smoking and the intoxicating effects of cannabis. It also is talking about using cannabis along the lines or using cannabis with alcohol or other, things that could affect a person's level of impairment, such as prescription drugs or other drugs, and warning people against this. Also to advising people with existing health risks to consult with physicians prior to using cannabis. As we discussed, there is a whole array of health risks for people, especially those with pre-existing conditions. And while it does make sense, or while it would be beneficial to address all of them, it's not reasonably feasible to do so. We'd have thousands of pages of fine print trying to address each and every concern that needs to be addressed. So unfortunately, this recommendation needs to be a little bit vague and open-ended to put a little bit of accountability on consumers. Continuing on, the recommendations are needing to say that pregnant people should not consume cannabis. This varies a little bit away from the current NCCRs, where it's saying that pregnant women should consume or should consult with a physician prior to cannabis use. This would mean changing the focus of the warning to be that pregnant people should not consume cannabis at all, and also changing the recommendation or changing that language to be gender neutral. So instead of addressing women, addressing people in general.
Commissioner Nelson, I'm sorry, excuse me. Are you advancing the slides? Because we're not seeing a change.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you see it?
I see your slides. They're not moving.
Yeah, I am. That's so bizarre.
You want to stop your sharing and start it up again? Sometimes it pauses.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I was like, wow, she's really giving us a good intro here.
Yep, I'm sorry. Okay, can you see this?
I see a huge button that says slideshow.
Weird. Okay, I don't know what's going on. I'm so sorry.
No, that's
Did we get something?
Possibly. Yes. Now we see your slides. Oh,
No,
now
you don't. Okay. Okay, let's try this one more time. I am so sorry, but thank you guys for your patience. Can you see this now?
Yes. There we go. Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So does the screen say recommendation number 1? Thank goodness.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So sorry, kind of going back to it. So I'll just recap this quickly so I'm not repeating myself too much because I know we have a time limit here. But first recommendation would be to keep the industry language the same between consumption lounges and dispensaries, using the baseline of NCCR 12.05 to kind of establish this, but making some tweaks to this and elaborating on these regulations further. So the first one is talking about that it should be disclosed, putting it on menus, giving pamphlets to people, having it posted on the walls of dispensaries. Those could all be options for this. The first real disclosure would be warning people that edibles take a while to kick in, and that they should start with about 10 milligrams if they're new to cannabis, and waiting for that to kick in before consuming any additional cannabis. Also to making warnings that people should know that smoking is hazardous and intoxicating. The continuing on, warning people that cannabis should not be consumed with alcohol or other prescription medication. And also too, like it could cause unpredictable levels of impairment, and people should be wary of consuming cannabis if they're under the influence of other things. And also too, warning people about the health risks of cannabis, especially if they do have pre-existing conditions. The slides are changing, right? Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, so continuing on, we need to obviously have warnings for pregnant people. As discussed before, it should be with regard to people in general. The current regulations specify women, but as we are investing in the times, it just makes more sense to be gender inclusive in these warning statements. And kind of continuing on with that, these should be posted in various aspects or various areas of a consumption lounge, but I have some in the other slides about that. Also warning people about how cannabis could impair concentration and affect their ability to operate machinery or drive, and warning people that driving under the influence of cannabis is illegal and could lead to prosecution if they're caught. Lastly, warning people about entering a smoking lounge means that you're going to be exposed to secondhand smoke, and putting age limits very clearly on each avenue of the entrance, or each place that a person can walk into a consumption lounge, making it known that no one under the age of 21 is permitted there. Having warnings with regard to overconsumption of cannabis and possible effects of overconsumption, and just requirements of where these should be posted, and the sizes, so we don't have consumption lounges giving these disclosures to people on business cards in 1-point font. So with regard to the signage requirements, requiring similar to what is in establishments in Nevada that serve alcohol, there's posting in restrooms saying that consuming alcohol is dangerous while pregnant. Kind of doubling down on this for consumption lounges and having similar posting requirements in restrooms, making it known that consuming cannabis while pregnant could be harmful to a developing baby, also including consuming cannabis while breastfeeding. So having those posted in addition to being posted on a menu or signage in a consumption lounge, I think has a lot of value. And also too, this is kind of what I was talking about with that sign, something small, but still big enough that people could see it. Again, similar to what's required in bars and restaurants that serve liquor with liquor warnings. Having something like that, I think, would be a very effective tool in educating the public that you shouldn't consume cannabis when you're pregnant or breastfeeding. The other one would be postings about it being a smoking lounge and the warnings of exposure to secondhand smoke. This is similar to what is required under the Arkansas Clean Indoor Air Act. So that's kind of where I got this from, but having a posting similar to what is required in Arkansas might be beneficial at consumption lounges at every point of entry, or however a person's coming into a consumption lounge, whether it be through an employee coming in through the back door or somebody walking in through the front door. Having this there, I think, is a very healthy tool to educate the public about what they're walking into and preventing other people from coming in that shouldn't be. So that's essentially it. Does anybody have any questions or feedback? Lauren?
I think these look great. I think I would just recommend taking out "or work" in the warnings about no one under 21 can enter or work, because if they can't enter, then that already covers they can't work inside.
Oh yeah, that's
right.
Really, yeah, it's kind of redundant, so should have entered.
Just minor.
I was actually going to comment on this as well. I don't really follow why there's a 21 years of age statement in the secondhand smoke exposure. To me, doesn't matter what your age is. It's secondhand smoke is hazardous to your health, period.
Okay, so just reducing it to like that, you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
Right. Yeah, and just more generally, I would like to see a little bit more information in these, and I'm open to just just kind of discussing. If we can't agree exactly on what it should go in there right now, that's okay. But I like, for example, that's a good idea. But I think there were a couple places in here telling people to consult with their doctor, which, you know, okay. But let's see. Like,
It was, yeah, ingesting this.
yeah, I think that's okay in predictable levels of impairment. So, but like people with health concerns should consult. I mean, sure, okay, but I think giving people a little bit more information about what's possible is helpful. So, you know, there may be mental or physical health risks associated with consumption of cannabis products, such as, you know, cardiovascular problems, risks of, you know, psychosis, for example. These are all things that are well established in the literature. And because, you know, for example, if you're someone who's, I don't know, has like underlying schizophrenia in your family, for example, and you know, you don't understand that it's possible that cannabis can exacerbate the risk that you're going to develop schizophrenia in the future, you know, you might want to know that.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestions. A little bit more detail.
Okay. So with regard to the detail though, like what conditions should we cover here? So because if we're talking about people with cardiovascular conditions, or we're talking about people with schizophrenia, like, you know, cannabis also might not be advised for people who are bipolar manic depressive, or, you know, it could actually exacerbate symptoms of depression for some people. It could make people with anxiety feel more anxious. So if we're going to talk about like one condition here, what is the level by which we're rating these? Because obviously, like, I know there's certain dangers associated with certain conditions, but there's other conditions too that might be arguably as important.
Right. And that's a good point. That's a very good point. I wonder if we could give like a such as.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean it's the only thing. Yeah, and I don't even know that we need to decide exactly on what the such as is. You know, we could say, hey, CCB, and you guys can, you know, review the evidence and make a decision as to, you know, looking at like prevalence of underlying health conditions in the population. You can make a decision as to like what to highlight, so that people have a little bit more information.
I think if we go that route, we should, instead of such as, we should say including but not limited to, because I think that, you know, that is a concern that people will read the 4 things that, you know, were agreed upon and said, nope, that's not an issue for me, and walk right in and then say, but you didn't tell me, you said the other things, but not these ones. So that way people don't know it's not an exhaustive list.
Yeah, I like that.
So, okay, so just to kind of get a better idea, like, so how would you reword this disclosure then?
So there may be mental or physical health risks associated with consumption of cannabis products, including but not limited to cardiovascular problems, psychosis, exacerbation of anxiety or depression symptoms, etc. People with health concerns should consult a physician. I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then CCB can review both the occurrence of the conditions and also just the state of the science on, you know, what's the state of the science as far as, you know, association of these conditions with consumption, and pick the ones with the best science and the highest prevalence in the population, so that it affects, we're picking like the big ones, you know, we don't have to like mess around on the details.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. So did I sorry, I wasn't typing fast enough. Was there anything else that you wanted to add into this?
Yeah, I think put just a comma after products. So it's yep, there you go. And then limited to cardiovascular problems, psychosis, or exacerbation of anxiety or depression symptoms, something like that. Or I guess maybe exacerbation is a bad word, but like, you know, they can wordsmith it.
Okay, all right, makes sense. All right. Was there any other recommendations or feedback? Sorry.
One other thing, for the ingestion of any amount of cannabis or cannabis products before driving may result in criminal prosecution. I wonder if it's also good here to say it impairs your ability to, well, no, that's the first one. Okay, never mind.
It's all good.
No, otherwise I really like it. I'm very appreciative of the inclusive language and the pregnant or breastfeeding warning too. I like that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that we need to embrace moving forward. So
Yeah.
Lauren?
Yeah.
I just to clarify, are we recommending these disclosures that can be like printed on a brochure when you walk in or something like that? And then some of them are posted signs that have like in the restroom, for example?
Yes. So I'm sorry if I didn't make that more clear. But these things should just be kind of printed on the menus, given to each of the people coming to a consumption lounge, and then, or, post on the walls. I kind of would like some feedback on what you guys would think would be the best with regard to where and how these things should be posted to effectively educate consumers. But the two that I highlighted specifically were with regard to cannabis and pregnancy, having those posted in the restrooms, and then the smoking lounge warning, like saying at the doors. So when someone walks in, they are obviously being warned that this is a smoking lounge and they're walking into a place that is going to expose them to secondhand smoke. But
Okay.
again,
Perfect. I just didn't catch the delineation between the separate ones. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are appropriate.
Okay, cool.
All right. Any more discussion of these? Something that we might want to discuss in the future is I would like to see the cannabis and pregnancy and breastfeeding. I would like to see that in places outside of cannabis consumption areas. I just think it's a part of public education that we really need to step up, because I think people they misunderstand.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think it needs to be at dispensaries as well, amongst other places. So
I'd like to see it at McDonald's, I'll be honest.
There you go.
Really, because not everyone is going into these legal places to purchase cannabis, so I just think it needs to be general knowledge. But we can discuss that later. So let's go on then. I think we're ready to vote. Would anyone like to move? Well, I will give you the option. Would you like to move to adopt them all at once, or to adopt them one by one?
I will move to adopt them all at once.
Okay, do I have a second?
Can I second that, or am I excluded from this vote?
Yeah, I think you can second it. I don't see why.
Okay, I second it.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 4 out of 5. Commissioner Hayes, do you want to tell us, want to elaborate on your vote? I think you're muted, Commissioner Hayes. Or maybe, Commissioner Hayes, can you hear us? All right, maybe we're having technical difficulties possibly. So we'll just return to that in a bit. So thank you very much, Commissioner Nelson.
Sharing.
All right, and I'm going to bring us home with the air quality recommendations. All right. So everyone can see my my slides? Yep, okay. So these are very similar to what I proposed last time. So I will briefly walk you through and then we can discuss if you'd like. My first recommendation is to combine all indoor cannabis smoking, vaping, and dabbing to a designated smoking room. And the why is just that, secondhand smoke exposure is secondhand smoke exposure. It doesn't really matter where it's from. It could be from a wildfire, from a cigarette, or from, burning cannabis flower or marijuana flowers. So what we want to do is protect workers and patrons as much as possible from secondhand smoke exposure because of its negative health effects. It's important to realize this will not eliminate risk for folks, especially for workers. And so we're going to need to consider additional means to protect workers. But this is, a way to make a first step, especially considering that the regulations or the law is pretty clear that they do want to allow smoking in the consumption lounges. The second recommendation is to reduce the risk that smoke or aerosolized, PM 2.5, et cetera, exits the designated smoking room into other parts of the consumption lounge, that that the CCB should consider requiring the following. And these are all taken from other states that have designated smoking rooms. So for example, to completely separate the rest of the lounge by solid partitions or glass with no openings other than doors, that the doors must be self-closing, that they must have a gasket so that they're sealed, that they must have a separate HVAC system, that the smoking room air must be directly exhausted to the outdoors and be filtered and not be placed in a place where, if you opened a window into the non-smoking area of the lounge, that it would allow the smoke to enter through that. That the filtration system must be sufficient to remove visible smoke and adequate to eliminate odor at the property line. And this might already be kind of addressed in the existing law, but one thing that's important to consider is that if a lounge were able to share a building with an unaffiliated business, for example, if a lounge is in a strip mall and is next to a coffee shop, those buildings share, walls, they share ceilings, and it's really difficult to kind of reverse or, engineer after the fact in a way to keep the smoke from entering into those neighboring businesses. So for that reason, a lot of jurisdictions say that the lounges have to be in freestanding buildings. I think it would be okay to say, freestanding building next to a dispensary, connected to a dispensary, I think would be okay, because it's kind of a reasonable expectation that, those are related businesses. Recommendation number 3, that the CCB mandate work protocols and indoor air quality standards that minimize employees' secondhand smoke exposure. So they could consider using the EPA ambient air quality standards for the non-smoking lounge spaces, focusing on 8-hour average and 15-minute peak. And I pulled out 2 potential pollutants as kind of things to focus on: PM 2.5 for the reasons that we've already learned, and then carbon dioxide because it is correlated with a lot of other air pollutants and it's easy to measure. So if you have high CO2 in a room, it suggests that you don't have adequate ventilation, and probably you're also going to have high PM 2.5. And I want to recommend that they not use current Nevada indoor air quality standards for smoking areas of casinos and bars, because they are not adequate to protect the public health. So let's not use, just because it's existing now does not mean it's what we should. It's not a gold standard. So I would like to see them improve upon what we already have. Number 4 is consumption lounges must design smoking rooms and work protocols such that the need to enter a smoking room is minimized for the employees. And we already talked about this, but the employees can monitor activities in the smoking room from a smoke-free area, that they can fulfill kind of regular anticipated patron requests from that smoke-free area, and then that they have adequate PPEs for that times that they do need to enter the smoking area, so that they can minimize their exposure while at work. And relatedly, I'd like to recommend that this CCB mandate indoor air quality standards and protocols that reduce the risk of cardiopulmonary or other acute health effects for workers and patrons while in the smoking room. So remember, someone who's, has asthma, exposure to the PM 2.5 in the smoking room could push them over the edge into an asthma attack. Someone who is kind of unknowingly on the edge of a heart attack entering a smoking room could push them over the edge into an active heart attack. So ways to accomplish these goals, they could include exhaust hoods over the seating areas in the smoking room. They could limit capacity. These are just two ways that I think we could recommend, but this recommendation is intentionally vague. It's because I think there's lots of ways to achieve this goal. Recommendation 6, mandate that outdoor smoking areas meet the following standards so that they have a filtration system sufficient to remove visible smoke from the smoking area and eliminate odor at the property line. That these smoking areas not be visible from the property line, and that they provide the same protections to employees as in recommendation number 4, so that there are protocols that minimize the need for employees to enter the outdoor smoking area. And finally, this last one is related to something that Commissioner Dupree brought up. So remember how we were talking about we're not really clear what the Nevada Clean Indoor Air Act allows. Does it allow for tobacco smoking in cannabis consumption lounges? Does it even allow for cannabis consumption in cannabis consumption lounges? I think that second question is something that's outside of our purview. But the question as to whether or not tobacco smoking and nicotine vaping are allowed in consumption lounges, the Public Health Law Center evaluation of Nevada law suggests that it does not. And so this might be a recommendation that is unnecessary, but I still felt the need to put it out there and get it on the public record because from a public health perspective, it's very important that we not allow tobacco smoking and nicotine vaping in cannabis consumption lounges. And the reason for that is we've made so much progress on this topic, tobacco control in society. It continues to be the #1 cause of preventable death in the United States. 450,000 people a year die from tobacco use. Indoor smoking bans discourage consumption and encourage smoking cessation, and I say smoking and tobacco smoking. Nevada has a really poor record when it comes to indoor clean air. And I would hate to see us concede more ground to this. I think cannabis consumption lounges have a lot of social justice and kind of practical reasons why they need to exist. I don't see the social justice or the practical reasons for allowing tobacco smoking indoors. I recognize, and most public health professionals recognize, that nicotine vaping is significantly less harmful than tobacco smoking. And so, I don't feel as strongly about that, but it still does create indoor air pollution. It's not clean air. And so, that's why I'm kind of including the two together. There's also a very practical reason for this recommendation, which is if the legislation says people can't bring cannabis products purchased off-site on-site. And so if for whatever reason in the future, the CCB decides people can smoke tobacco or vape nicotine in the consumption lounges, I think it's been really hard to enforce that no outside product because, especially nicotine vaping, how can you tell if someone says I'm vaping nicotine? Okay, fine. Are you going to bring out your mass spectrometer and see if there's really nicotine in it? No, you're not, So I think there's a practical reason, but also an overarching public health reason. And I also think that if this if the CCB did end up deciding to allow tobacco smoking in consumption lounges, there would be a huge amount of pushback from the public health world. So with all of that said, let's open it up to discussion. So Commissioner, I see Commissioner Chu, saw you first.
Hi, just a clarification. I don't know if I missed the beginning. Is this the smoking area? Is that for smoking and vaping in the same area?
The designated smoking room, yes, would be defined as a place where you could smoke, vape, or dab cannabis.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
thank you. That should be. Yeah, cannabis smoking.
Okay,
vape,
it is
yeah,
that.
there you
Sorry.
go. Yep.
Yeah, I just missed it. Sorry. The other question I had was, I think you mentioned the 8-hour time-weighted average exposure. I think there's also a 15-minute short-term exposure limit.
Yep. There's a 15-minute peak.
And sometimes, got it. Okay. Peak CO2. Okay, got it. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Commissioner Dupree.
Mine are just very minor. I think this looks good on recommendation 3, which you're on. I just want to make sure that it's very clear that we want the CCB to require a way to enforce this or monitor this. I think it's really easy to say, make sure your air quality is good, and then it's up to the inspector once a year to show up and measure the air quality and say, you guys have been operating wrong for the last year or something like that. So just a method of monitoring or enforcement that's put on the lounge itself.
Yeah, right.
And then my other, just to throw it out there, I don't know if you want to pick it up or not, but my understanding of the Public Health Law Center's response also said that NCIA blocks smoking of cannabis in general. So I don't know if we want to make another recommendation that just says either change NCIA to allow cannabis within consumption lounges, or like somehow bring it up to CCB that there's a conflict between these two laws. I don't know how you want to approach that.
I think that's more of a heads up rather than a recommendation.
Yeah, sure.
Just, which I can summarize in this part of the discussion. Just there seems to be a clear conflict between what was intended in the cannabis lounge legislation and in the Clean Indoor Air Act, and they're going to have to figure out a way to resolve it.
Okay, perfect. That's all I had. Thanks.
Any other comments? I think I saw Commissioner Hayes.
I was just going to say, I thought the record keeping would be really great for the air quality if people weren't, if there was only going to be an annual inspection, knowing it was right over a period of year, I think would be important. I'm sorry for earlier, I got locked out of this conference room. I stepped out to get some water as I ran out of water, and the door swung shut behind me and locked me out.
That's okay. That was actually one of my fears leaving my office during the break too. I was like, oh, I have to remember to make sure I bring my keys. All right. Anything else? Okay, seeing nothing, then I am going to move that we approve these recommendations all at once.
I second.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see stuff better. So please raise your hand if you approve recommending these recommendations as a group. Okay, great. I see everyone's hand. Wonderful. Thank you. Look at us. I think we might actually get done on time. Anyway. Okay. Now our next agenda item is future meetings. So
do we need to circle back and vote on the last round?
Yes, actually, thank you for that. So Commissioner Hayes, we had previously voted on the health notices and disclosure recommendations. I don't know how much of the...
I heard most of it.
Okay.
And so I'm good. I was good with voting on most of it, but then I my phone was in here and I didn't have anybody's phone number, and I tried calling the CCB and nobody would pick up the phone, and I was like, oh my God.
It's okay. I think for the purposes of time, I think it's okay for us to just move forward as we are, because I think otherwise we'd have to go back and review everything. And I can just clarify that we just had a commissioner down during that section. And of course, if things come to mind, Commissioner Hayes, as you know, you're looking back at what we did today, please let me know if you have additional concerns and I can communicate those.
No, I was really okay with the whole thing.
Okay, all right, great, wonderful. So future meetings. So we're going to take a little bit of a rest, and I anticipate that we're going to reconvene in, January, February, somewhere in there as a subcommittee. Of course, there will be another Cannabis Advisory Commission meeting. And I believe they're trying to schedule that for the first half of November. So I will be presenting our discussion and recommendations that we had today to the Cannabis Advisory Commission at that next meeting. So you can take a little rest, let your brains relax, and I'll be in touch, January, and we can start thinking about what else we might want to, what topics we might want to tackle for the future. I think there was some shared interest in, packaging, for example. There's probably better ways to do that. I'd love to hear from everybody, but we'll tackle that at our next meeting. Any additional comments from the commission on that topic?
I just have a note as you carry our conversations up to the committee, and they're making a decision about how to handle the inspections. If they ask or if it's relevant to the conversation, you might want to let them know that I think SNHD, if they want us to help with the food inspection side of things, I don't know whether SNHD will require a permit from SNHD for us to go in and inspect, which would be an added cost to the lounge, or a contract for consulting fees or something like that. I'm sure that's another conversation, but just for them to consider as they decide who to inspect what.
Okay.
Maybe just carry that along.
Yep, I will do that.
Thanks.
Any other comments before we move on to public comment? Okay. So now we've entered the public comment section. So for those of you on Zoom, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we will open up your line so that you can speak. Or if you're on the phone, you can push *9 to indicate that you would like to provide public comment. I see one hand up. Christopher Stokes, you are open for public comment. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Hello, thank you all for being here today. Yesterday, I attended a subcommittee on the Social Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion program. And although the meeting was held with the best of intentions, several major factors kind of stood out in regards to accomplishing the committee's goals and recommendations for equity, diversity, and inclusion. An issue became obvious as the chair, Aisha Goins, who led the meeting, mentioned a minority cannabis business was going out of business. This led to awareness that the cannabis industry, as it stands in Las Vegas, has no incentive to do business with social equity candidates or applicants. Once anyone attains this license, what next? As of October 2021, the cannabis industry in Clark County took in $721 million in revenue. The marijuana sales market is forecast to grow over the coming years to $1.2 billion. And allowing for social equity candidates is a testament to the corrective actions of the Cannabis Advisory Committee, and it is commendable in their attempt to right a wrong, yet most in our industry would continue this hustling sideways or operating for appearances. Having a license for social use does not instantly create any value to the applicant or ultimately the holder. A valued business plan and various items associated with startup funds are needed from concept to soft opening. To speak to Chair Pearson's point, the HVAC system with the ability to deodorize the air is a major cost in of itself. So with this said, true equity would be the access to funding. US banks and the SBA will not do business with marijuana-related businesses. Providing a license to an applicant and then leaving the applicant to fend for themselves financially seems disingenuous. The next step in building our industry from the ground up must be inclusion and access to funds. The community and local incubators and abatements can benefit the tax base and increase in excise and sales taxes and ultimately job creation. Therefore, addressing these factors would be the first step towards true equity inclusion, because currently there is no incentive to do business with a minority-owned or socially disadvantaged cannabis concern. And to speak to Dr. Chu's point, we have to buy from dispensaries, but they necessarily don't have to sell to us or to a discount or to any SEA concern. So with there being, so some of the recommendations could be that the first licensing go to those who already have minority-owned businesses and can somehow incorporate the lounge effect into their businesses. That would immediately impact sales and excise funds, excise taxes. And I think that was really it. We don't really get any banks or loans. So there really are no funds for, and there's no incentive to do business. So giving a license to me is, you know, kind of, again, kind of hustling sideways. And I think we need to address that. Changing the language in ownership from 51%. I don't know of any business that is going to invest in a company and give the owner 51%. So that affects business valuations, which we as small businesses will need to move forward. We're going to need the ability to evaluate our business. 49% equity. I think the language could probably be changed to controlling equity as opposed to 51%, because this will affect our business valuations and our need to raise funds. And if we're getting licenses to people in disadvantaged situations, then you would doubt that they would have the equity to invest in this company or concern. So we would need to invest in that as well. So that's my comment.
Thank you so much.
I know that was my.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate your comment. Are there any other public comments? I don't see anything. Oh, I see, let's see, Zarmish Tariq.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I was just gonna say a public comment on behalf of Washoe County Health District in the Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention Program. We already submitted this letter, so I just wanted to be here and say it. So to start off, there is no safe level of exposure level to secondhand smoke, whether resulting from cannabis or tobacco smoking. Smoking and vaping cannabis produces fine particulates that pollute indoor air to unhealthy levels. Secondhand cannabis smoke contains many of the same toxic and cancer-causing chemicals found in tobacco smoke, including some in higher amounts, including those linked to lung cancer. Cannabis smoke exposure has a more damaging and long-lasting effect on blood vessel function with negative effects on the cardiovascular system than exposure to secondhand tobacco smoke. Everyone has the right to breathe clean air, cannabis lounge employees and patrons alike. Washoe County Health District recommends the following: sealing of cross-contamination pathways and ensuring physical barriers between the smoking and non-smoking areas are airtight, having separate ventilation systems serving the smoking and non-smoking spaces. If a smoking room shares a common plenum, such as air circulation space with adjacent non-smoking spaces, either block off a plenum or ensure that the smoking room is under slightly negative pressure relative to the ceiling plenum. Limiting contamination from smoking permitted areas to other areas inside the building by exhausting from the smoking rooms to the outside without recirculation to other occupied spaces. So altogether, Washoe County Health District appreciates a Cannabis Advisory Committee, specifically Public Health Subcommittee, for their planning efforts to make cannabis lounges safe and healthy places through outlining recommendations and informing relevant discussions. Washoe County Health District Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention Program is happy to provide any resources to assist in the committee's decisions regarding the public health and safety decisions for cannabis lounges. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Are there any other folks on Zoom or on the telephone who would like to make public comments?
Chairperson, I just have a quick question. It's been a long morning, so I might have missed it. In your recommendations, did we include a way to filter the exhaust air?
I just said that it should be filtered.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments on Zoom or on the phone? If you want to make a comment on the phone, you can push *9. Amber, do you see anyone on the phone?
No, I see no other public comment.
Great. I don't see anyone else on Zoom either. So I am going to adjourn this meeting. I really want to thank everyone on the Public Health Subcommittee. You all have worked really hard, and I've been really it's been a wonderful experience working with all of you. So I really look forward to doing it more in the future. I think we're an effective group of people and with really nicely kind of complementary areas of expertise. So thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you either at the overall CAC meeting or at our next meeting in January.